18. He says, the wise view equally a Brahmana endowed with learning and humility, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and even an outcast. Right, so the previous two verses we're talking about a self-realized soul, or with respect to the previous verse is talking about a self-realized soul with respect to the past. This verse talks about with respect to the present. So how does he view the world that he's in, as it were? He says the wise view equally a Brahmana, a cow, elephant, dog, and outcast. So what this list of beings does, it gives or indicates the range of beings that any of us can interact with. The highest quality of human being is designated here as a Brahmana. So a Brahmana is someone who is at the peak of human development, endowed with learning and humility. And they use this word, an outcast, a person who's at the lowest level of development. Most spiritually ignorant is the phrase he uses here among humans. So the difference between the Brahmana and the outcast, they're obvious. One has learning and humility. The other has ignorance and arrogance. Their mode of functioning is completely different. One is selfless, the other is highly selfish. So for the average person, when we look at the two, we see a difference. We categorize them as different and then function on that basis. So the self-realized soul, I think he puts it here in, if you look at the final paragraph of the commentary, he says, sages look with an equal eye at all beings. Their vision passes through the material layers of the body, mind, and intellect and recognizes the divinity within. They see the one self present in each and every living being. They view the same consciousness pervading everywhere. So this is the idea that the self-realized soul has recognized the self within. They've gone through that process of spiritual discipline and recognized their inner self, their true personality. The analogy that's often used to describe or indicate the self is that of electricity. You have a heater, a cooler, a fan, different equipments, different functions, but the electricity functioning through all of them is the same. So you can look at the three pieces of equipment and look at their functions. This one's heating, this one's cooling, this one's moving. Or you can look at the three pieces of equipment and see the electricity functioning through all of them and recognize that electricity functioning through all of them is the same. But you have to know electricity before you can do that. If you've just come from the middle of the jungle somewhere where there's no electricity, you would see the three equipments functioning differently. You'd have no idea of their power source. You'd only be able to see the different functions. This one makes things hot. This one makes things cold. This one moves air around. It's only when you're acquainted with electricity that you can perceive electricity functioning in all of them. In the same way, to the individual is not acquainted with the self. And so when the individual looks at the best human being and the worst human being, that's what we relate to. We relate to the surface expression. And that's why we get caught up in relationships. We look at what the person is doing. Now, generally speaking, we don't even go into the attitude or the intention behind it. We simply look at the expression of the person and judge them based on the expression. We often don't even say, well, hang on, what's that person intending? Because that may give us pause. We just look at the surface expression, get caught up, and then we get reactive. The self-realized soul goes beyond the surface expression, beyond the mind and intellect, which is the intention, and into the self. And so when he sees the best human being functioning, it's the self enabling that. When he sees the worst human being being the worst, it's the self enabling that. That's what he sees when he views the best and the worst. And does he react with both of them the same? He'll react with both of those according to whatever the obligation is at the moment. So I'll give you an example. If you are let's say your own child is throwing a tantrum or disobeying you or something like that. Because there's that attachment and involvement to that child, what happens is the reaction is improper. The way that you deal with the child is improper because you're so caught up and you want the child to be a different way and so on and so forth. When it's, say, a neighbor's child that you're looking after, there's no attachment. There's no involvement in the personality. There's no involvement in their upbringing or anything else. So when they throw a tantrum, you know exactly how to deal with them because the relationship is clear. It's unmuddied by any of the attachment. And so you relate properly to your neighbor's child when he throws a tantrum, but you relate improperly to your own child when he throws a tantrum because of the involvement and the attachment. So the self-realized soul, zero involvement, zero attachment for any aspect of the world. So what that means is that whatever is he's confronted with, he will relate to them according to the situation, according to what it demands. So what it means is that what it doesn't mean is that when you see a terrible person being a terrible person, that's also the self. Let's leave it alone. It doesn't mean that you condone or permit bad or negative behaviors. But what it does mean is that when you are correcting the bad behavior, when you're stepping in and interrupting it and putting a stop to it, you're not doing it from a position of being attached or involved. You're doing it purely because it's the right thing to do. So we never relate to two people in the same way because no two people are the same. The question is, on what basis do you make your choices? That's the real question. And so the choice that you make, when you are attached, you don't have the freedom to make the choice. When you see something terrible happening, you're helpless. You will react according to whatever your mind tells you. When you are objective, okay, your mind may react with disgust and anger, but you also recognize the best thing for the situation is this. Right? The example that we've given before, and this is on the flip side of it, you see someone struggling in the water you're standing on the pier, you see someone struggling in the water. The initial reaction is, we have to save that person. And so your impulse is to jump in the water and save them. But you can't swim and you're fully clothed. So all you do is make a bad situation twice as bad. So the reaction is there, let's save them, but that impulse has to be governed. So because I can't swim, what's the best thing to do? The best thing to do is for me to start yelling, help, help, help. Can anybody swim? Is there a lifeguard? So the reaction will be there according to the quality and the nature of the personality. That too will vary. A person who is highly self-centered will have different reactions to someone who is unselfish when they're faced with the same thing. The person's down there struggling in the water. A person who is self-centered, their first thought will be, there's something of an inconvenience. I've got somewhere to be in half an hour, Or I don't really want to embarrass myself by yelling. It's a bit, I'm not getting in that water. I'm not jumping down there. That's the first reaction. But then they may hopefully guide and say, okay, it doesn't matter what I look like. Let's start yelling. So the quality and the nature of the reaction depends upon the personality as well. So yeah, there'll be a reaction. The question is, do you have the personality on a leash or does it have you on a leash? So this is then the definition of objectivity, is to x-ray through material layers, body, mind, and intellect, and see the self within. This is the ultimate objectivity. You're seeing nothing other than the self. Because you're seeing nothing other than the self, you're not involved in the physical expression, you're not involved in the emotional quality, you're not involved in the intellectual understanding behind any person's actions or otherwise. You view it as a witness, and then decide what the appropriate action is based upon your obligation. What's my role in this situation? Who am I in this situation? Right? Act on that basis. And it's not, we talk about asking that question. Yes, you can ask that question, sit back and sort of ask it, but it's more of an instant reflection. And the more we practice it and the more sharp the intellect becomes and the more calm the mind becomes, that process of questioning becomes much more immediate. It becomes much more efficient. It becomes such a habit for you to question before you act that the questioning happens sort of lightning fast. But in the initial stages, we've got to go through that that hard yakka of stopping and asking and actually answering the question. It's like when you're driving a car. After 5 years driving, it's just effortless. And that first 5 days of learning how to drive, it's terrible. You've got to put so much conscious effort into getting everything right, especially if you're driving a manual. Hit clutch, then change gear, then slowly release the clutch, and then add a little. Once you've got that practice down, it becomes easy. It's a little bit that way. So the practice of questioning has to be developed, and then it naturally starts to continue itself. Doesn't mean that we can be complacent, because it can always fall away. That's where the analogy doesn't fit. Like once you've got driving, it's not that you have to keep practicing, otherwise it falls away. Questioning can degrade. As the mind starts to get more involved in other activities, your degree of questioning will start to fall away. So we've got to maintain it in a way that we don't have to maintain something like a driving practice.